With that, let me introduce Bruce. He's a board member of the Sacramento History Alliance and Preservation Chair of the Sacramento Art Deco Society. Graduated from Occidental College in LA with degrees in studio art and art history. He spent many years as a marketing and graphic design professional in LA and Sacramento. Over the last 10 years, he's written many articles about early 20th century Sacramento artists and architects, including Alfred Eichler, designer of the Tower Bridge, which if you live in Sacramento, that's a dear bridge to us. That's our landmark. And Carlo Tagliabue, a noted sculptor for Gladys McBean. This is up in Lincoln, California, and they do a lot of the, or have done in the 20s and 30s, a lot of the Art Deco decorations on some of the buildings you see. With that, I turn it over to Bruce. Thank you, Bruce.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction. And let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll get into the program. So is everyone seeing the Art Deco Hidden Treasures presentation?
Yep, looks good, Bruce.
Perfect. I just want to make sure. So I will get started. Thank you. It's nice to have introductions out of the way. And just to confirm, we are thinking about 40 minutes of presentation, correct? And then Q&A?
Sounds good.
Okay. So this is an interesting, each year I try to develop a new presentation specifically for the Art Deco Society, but I've had great interest and cross-pollination between organizations. And the idea for this actually was developed in conjunction with the Sacramento Public Library. And of all things, this lecture was originally going to be given at Arden Dibnick Library on Watt Avenue on March 16th, 2020. And needless to say, the world shut down on March 13th. So this presentation was eventually given through actually the Renaissance Society the first time last fall. But I'm glad I had this one, dare I say, in the can, so to speak, because I've tried to do some other presentation research and it's just very difficult with all the libraries and archives closed. So I'm going to start this presentation by just doing a little overview of what is Art Deco before I talk about local sites. And I also want to once again thank the Friendship Force for inviting me for this evening's presentation. So one of the typical questions I get very, very often is, well, what is the time period of the Art Deco movement or era? And typically it's between the wars, World War I and World War II. So that's where these dates come from, 1919 to 1942. But actually, Deco lingered on into the late 40s and even early 50s because from a commercial standpoint, when the world stopped for World War II, all the manufacturers from automobile companies to decorative art companies, when they started up, again, they generally started with Art Deco. Now, the real major event that is the hallmark of the Deco period was a large exposition in Paris in 1925, Exposition des Arts Décoratifs. That's where the simplified name Art Deco originates from. And it was a grand exposition showing all types of decorative and fine art and architecture in Paris. It attracted individuals from all over the world. And this was the centerpiece on the main avenue of the exposition. And it was a 48-foot tall Lalique crystal fountain. And so all those jets are streams of water coming off of it. So it was quite an epic sight, I imagine, to see. So now I'm just going to talk about some of the things that contributed to the Art Deco movement. And there were, of course, in the early 20th century, many, many different art movements influencing what was happening. Of course, there were the many isms of fine art, from Art Nouveau to Cubism to Futurism to the Bauhaus. And they each played a role in influencing different types of Art Deco. There was a famous ballet company in Paris, Sergei Digilev's Ballet Russe, which also was very instrumental. They did fantastic theater sets as well as costumes. And what I've come to appreciate, even with my commercial art background, is that, you know, many times art movements are being influenced as much by potentially the fashion industry as any other in moving color palettes and styles. And this was certainly true in the early 20th century. There was also great interest and appreciation in early civilizations like the Mayan and the Egyptians. Some of you might know King Tut's tomb was discovered in 1924. So it was a very opportune time for King Tut to influence the movement. The other big deal of the 1920s were all the new forms of speed transportation, faster trains, faster planes, faster ocean liners, and faster cars. And many of that imagery made its way into the Art Deco movement. And finally, there are new materials. Two of the ones that are commonly thought of is aluminum and Bakelite, but there were others. As some of you might also know, that Bakelite was kind of an early form, a precursor to what the plastic industry would ultimately be in the 50s and the 60s. Now that I've talked about time period and influences, the other thing I like to talk about is that Art Deco is many things. There's many subsets. I'm going to describe 6 subsets, and in theory, you could do a lecture on each of the subsets individually. First, there's French High Deco. That's generally the most kind of lavish detailing. It was very popular at the exposition in 1925. It's very intricate, very lavish. Of course, we talked about the exotic through foreign countries, foreign lands. Skyscraper, all the development of the new skyscrapers of the period influenced, you know, there were inkwells that were made in the shape of skyscrapers. Zigzag and geometric. And then really one of my favorites, which is streamlined modern, and many times neon is thrown in because, for example, many of the marquees, like our Crest Theater or the Tower Theater, the neon is applied to really streamline modern buildings. And finally, machine age. This is one that individuals are many times less familiar with. It's basically taking the new form of industrial objects, machines, and elevating them to an art form. And I'll give you some examples of that as we go through the presentation. And then when I was developing this, I thought it'd be fun just to do a little brief test and check everyone's Art Deco knowledge. This is an easy test. You're just going to think to yourself. I've composed 6 questions associated roughly with the subsets I just described. And the first one is, in your own mind, what is the favorite animal subject of Art Deco artists? I can think of a couple, and I'm going to reveal what my suggestion was, and that was a gazelle or a stag. That was a very popular image and very common. This fireplace screen also kind of shows what I mean by high deco. It's very floral, very decorative, certainly not streamlined modern. Oh, I jumped. I revealed who was the main king of the Art Deco period. And of course, I did already mention King Tut. The 1924 discovery was, you just had a huge impact on artists, designers of all type. Then number 3 is, what is the most important building? 2 buildings come to mind in New York City. I think if one has been visited New York City, you probably have one or the other as a favorite. My absolute favorite, it would be, and I got to get this to move, the Chrysler Building. It is a wonderful combination of different Art Deco styles. It's both geometric zigzag as well as streamline, and it's kind of quintessential. I'm always get excited when I see the Chrysler Building, or the other, of course, would be the Empire State, if they're featured in movies or serial television shows. The number 4 is probably a little bit more challenging. If you're into the art movements of the 20th century, you may have heard of this institution, but it was hugely influential still to this day. And the art school would be the Bauhaus. And the Bauhaus was in Germany, initially in Dresden, but many of its professors, when the Nazis came to power in the early 30s, basically the pressure on the Bauhaus and the professors was, unfortunately, they had to leave the country. And to our benefit, really, many of them came to the West. And for example, in architecture, the 2 of the presidents of the Bauhaus, Walter Gropius, who was the first president, went to Harvard as their dean of architecture. And then the other was Mies van der Rohe, went to Chicago and really helped start the Illinois Institute of Technology. And he was the dean of IIT for many, many years. Quintessential form of transportation, like the skyscrapers, there are 2 that come to mind, but I also have a favorite here. And that would be streamline trains. Of course, the other would be aircraft, DC-3s and other variations. Boeing had a early buy 2-engine prop airplane, but for my money, the streamline trains were just terrific. They were like ocean liners on rail. Of course, this is one featured at the 39 World's Fair. And this is probably the most challenging question is, what is an important public works project in the Southwest? And this one applies to machine age, something mechanical rising to the level of art. And I was thinking of Hoover Dam, and these are specifically the turbines. And some of you may have seen this photo. It's a famous photo, but this was a time during also the Depression where there were notable photographers taking pictures of all of the heroic infrastructure, bridges, dams that were being done at the time. And they have actually kind of risen to their own form of art. Then I had a question to myself, could I actually find any of these things in Sacramento under the concept of hidden treasures? So this is what some of the, just a few examples I found. For animals, I wasn't able to find a gazelle, but I found this wonderful yearbook cover. This is for City College, at the time junior college, for the Pioneer 1939 with a panther. Big cats were very popular during the period. I wasn't able to find a king tut, but this is a wonderful bas-relief at the entrance doors to the California State Library. It's supposed to be kind of a heroic figure of judicial authority. I thought it was also wonderful in its geometric form. We don't have any vintage Art Deco towers, but this step back tower, the Plaza Tower on Cesar Chavez Park on 9th is actually a postmodern building, but done in the classic Art Deco style. For the Bauhaus, this was an easy one. This is actually a facade panel on K Street, and it's actually the symbol for the Sacramento Art Deco Society. So I thought that was very appropriate. How about streamlined trains? Well, actually in Sacramento, that's an easy one because we have plenty of stream trains, and this is one of their wonderful diesel trains, formerly of the Western Pacific, which was also based out of Sacramento. And then for machine age, this is another bas-relief on a state building on N Street across from the state capitol, and I'll talk more about it. But I was just kind of pleasantly surprised that if you search it, you can find some interesting things. So moving forward, Now I'm going to go through different sections. They don't follow perfectly to the subsets, but they seem to fit well with good hidden treasures in Sacramento. The first is I'm going to just talk about three buildings that are notable. They're all in the central part of Sacramento, and they'll help cover these styles from Art Deco to Streamline. The first building is the Crest building on K. It's between 8th and 9th, and it's just a wonderful example of Deco, really high Deco architecture. It has great architectural terracotta. Many of its features, like the strong vertical piers, the spandrels, or those spaces between the windows, are very fanciful, and it's just one of my favorite local buildings. It also has wonderful close-up details. This is the canopy done out of some sort of metal, but it's got all the bells and whistles of the era. It's got on the canopy zigzag chevron shapes. It's just very attractive and kind of interesting when you actually get up close and look at it in detail. High up on the building is also some terrific architectural terracotta. This is one panel. It's probably roughly 3.5 feet by 3.5 feet, but it shows some of the other well-known features of the Deco period, like cornucopias were very popular, florals were very popular. But the other thing I wanted to mention about this, I do not believe this particular terracotta was done by Glad McBean, but it shows kind of the classical effort they went at how to figure out how to cast these things and then put them back together. This is actually an 8-piece. So each of the lines you see, almost like a chess, it's almost like a little puzzle putting it together. And I think it helps just explain the complexity of how they did these things. Another great building just up the street at the corner of 10th and K. This would actually be on the southeast corner, is the Forum building. In Sacramento, as a regional city, we really kept our buildings and kept adding to them, particularly in the early 20th century. This building originally started with 6 stories. It was then elevated later on, and then later on it was upgraded in the lower floors with architectural Art Deco terracotta. This is the grand entrance, and all of this is Glad McBean terracotta. And you can see the step backs, chevrons. I particularly like the etched glass of the 2nd and 3rd floor windows. Here's another detail. It shows that the building was really what we would call a transitional building, because it has elements of high deco, streamline, as well as zigzag. This is the header over the front doors. Terrific cast aluminum. I mentioned that earlier as a new material, cast aluminum panels, and the typography is wonderful, very Art Deco typography. Another thing I'm going to mention is that actually in the Sacramento area, some of the best hidden deco is not physically in Sacramento, but is potentially in either Sacramento County or the adjacent counties. And so I'm going to talk about a few of those, because some of the beauty of being outside an urban core is you have a tendency less to be torn down. And I know if anyone recognizes this, but this is the main administration building as it looked when it opened in the late 30s at McClellan Air Force Base. At the time, it was called the Sacramento Air Depot. Well, there we go, it finally advanced. This is actually the other side of the building, but you can see it's very attractive. It's very well maintained. When the military left and the McClellan Park was formed, this did become the main administration building of McClellan Park. And the building is very well maintained, which does my heart good. Just going to show a few interiors. This is the conference room doors, just great eagle icons. And then this is my favorite, absolute favorite bas relief of the machine age. This would also qualify under that. This is actually a header of one of the warehouses, but I just love kind of the mix. It almost has a modernism approach as well as a machine approach. But it really is talking to how machines can be elevated as an art form. Decorative tile. That's also a big, I'm a big fan of decorative tile. My interest in tile actually even goes beyond architectural tile, as Glad McBean made. Glad McBean is most known for doing these huge gargoyles and huge eagles, but they actually did own companies that did smaller projects and even did home tiles. But I'm going to traverse through some of the wonderful tile examples we have in Sacramento. And I apologize, for some reason I'm having a certain delay when I try to advance my slides. Here's a recent discovery. I actually found this in the local school in Elmhurst at a Preservation Sacramento walking tour, their annual walking tour in 2017, I believe. And I love this. This is another transition piece. It's really not pure Art Deco. It's really kind of a combination of arts and crafts and Orientalism, but it has features like the black outfit, the floral pattern. You can see the motif coming through. And I was so touched by it, I wanted to share it. This actually shows the full splash plate, and it's a very attractive. I like the way the arts and crafts tiles on the outside kind of play with the color field of the splash plate. And I think it's a little treasure, and I think that it's just great we have some of our local schools who have been preserved, and luckily with their preservation came the decorative arts. Ray, I don't know if you can hear me. I'm having quite a drag on my slide, so it may be my own feed, but if you have any suggestions, I'm open to them.
I don't have any suggestions. Just
Okay, well,
muscle on.
We will muscle on. This is another building. This is actually right across the street from the Forum building. It's the IOF, and it was originally a very fanciful building built in the 1880s, but it was reclothed in wonderful tile in 1936. And this, once again, is Glad McBean tile. And the person who did the covering of the building was a well-known local architect by the name of Charles Dean. Dean, you will know many of his buildings. He did the Theater Judah School, he did Iceland, he did the Sutter Club, very active. And what I like about this is the tile at street level is as wonderful as the tile up on the building. Now this is at street level, and there's this wonderful series of very kind of intimate retail shops. I'm just going to call out some of the features. There's rounded edge walls. Each of the little tiles have their own kind of figurative calligraphy style. And there's just something I wish we were in a world that allowed small retailers the opportunity to be in these spaces, because they're actually quite wonderful, and I hope they are preserved into the future. Here's just a close-up of some of the tiles. And then another set of buildings I'm going to speak about is Grant Union High School. For many years, I had meant to get out there, and I finally got out there 2 or 3 years ago, and I realized this is another treasure. I think I would like to do a walking tour, and I teamed up with Preservation Sacramento, and we did a Jane Jacobs walk at Grant Union several years ago, 2019. But it's a great campus because, once again, 3 different architects, notable architects, did building there. Harry Devine, Charles Dean, and Leonard Starks. It also has a nice auditorium. We thought it would be wonderful before the walking tours to get someone out to play the organ. So Dave Marino, who some of you might know, came out, played the organ for about 15 minutes, gave a little lecture, and then we did multiple walking through tours through the campus. This is a great late 40s showing, of all things, Grant High had a really unique history of developing facilities that had never been done before at a public high school. One was it had its own soda fountain. So this is actually the kids coming out of the soda fountain. And this is how it looks today. Now, sadly, on the right, you see where there was actually a window where kids could buy tickets to plays or football games, but at least the tiles have survived. Here's some additional tiles, as well as upper left is kind of a machine age vent for the organ, actually, in the auditorium. And then I've also had a lot of interest. Some of you may have recently seen I did a lecture on an artist by the name of Dunbar Dyson Beck, who worked a great deal with Eleanor McClatchy and family. Well, this is another project that Beck did not work on, but it's another reflection of the McClatchys giving back to Sacramento. And so in this case, their father, or Eleanor's father, had passed away. And that's how the high school got named. And this is also how a wonderful tile fountain came to be at McClatchy High, and it is a Glad McBean fountain. So this is the central portion of the fountain. You can see a beautiful floral pattern. This is the full fountain, and it's in relatively good shape. It is in a courtyard that is locked, but unfortunately, if you really get close, you can start to see some of the unfortunate damage. It originally would have had a blue kick plate at the bottom, well, it's been replaced with marble. But we're blessed to have it there, and we're blessed to have it protected. And it can be seen from multiple hallway windows out into the courtyard. It has 8 historical panels. These panels were actually not done in Sacramento. They were actually done at a facility in Los Angeles owned by Glad McBean. And one last detail is I love the lion head because that's the mascot of McClatchy High. Architecture. Once again, some of our best examples are outside of Sacramento. And I'm just going to focus on one architect of note. And his name is George Sellon. Actually, I jumped a gun there. I wanted to mention that each of the buildings that I'm going to show on George were done under the WPA. George Sellon was the first California state architect. He was hired after the great earthquake and fire in 1906. And he was there only a couple years prior to going into private practice. And he was one of these architects he went from doing Victorian to arts and crafts, to Art Deco, streamline modern, and finally mid-century modern. But I'm just going to talk about Art Deco, and I'm going to talk about 3 buildings. The first is he did the courthouse in Nevada City, and it's just a great ocean liner of a building. Even has its own mast. And another thing I like to do when I'm doing research is when I visit a building, I always look for the history plate. And wonderfully, during the WPA, they had many times did the plates. And there is George Sellon noted. Another one you may be familiar with, and George Sellon did design it, was the Washington Firehouse. And of course, this is looking at it in the 1980s, and today it looks much better. And there it is. It is now Burgers and Brew, and it is a wonderful spot. I've noticed that they've had tents out of late, but that they seemingly are going to do very, very well as the weather is coming back, and it was really a wonderful restoration and honoring the original streamlined modern building. My last one is Butte Hospital, and I wasn't even familiar with this building when I started to do my research. And it turned out to be my all-time favorite, maybe Deco building in Northern California. It's 2 wings. This is one of the wings. And once again, just like the Nevada County Courthouse, Sellon definitely was enamored with ships. This is the postcard showing, you can see the second wing in the background. And this building has a wonderful story. During the fires, it actually became a rescue center for 600 animals, 350 dogs, several hundred cats, and then other small creatures that weren't at the county fairgrounds. And then this section probably is one of the best representatives for Deco treasures, and that is bas reliefs. And we have several wonderful examples, and some of these you will actually recognize. I call some of our hidden treasures out in the open. I'm going to focus on one artist's efforts. He was Gladden McBean, Carlo Talabou. This is him in person. And he did a wonderful set of bas reliefs for the 2 buildings you see here. At the time, on the left would have been the DMV building, and on the right, Public Works. They've changed, and now they are Food and Ag on the left and Department of Transportation on the right. But Talabou did the surrounds to the front doors. And I'm just going to show you a couple of vignettes. Here's water resources, highways, one of the towers. And then, although it's a little strange because it's on the Ag building, CHP officers, and acknowledgement that DMV does license plates. Another discovery, and this only came through doing walking tours. I'm going to talk about just this one bas relief here at the header of course, this is one of the water towers, or what they called overhead storage towers. This one is the one at City College. I've always loved this bas relief. For years, I did not know who did it until a friend on a walking tour took a close-up of the icon lower right, and of all things, he showed it to me, and there was Talibu's name. I was truly surprised. Alfred Eichler, he also did bas-reliefs. He did many buildings, but he is given credit for something that I'd looked at for years and would have never attributed to him. And that would be the bas-reliefs on, at the time, he designed the building. This was the Department of Education. It's now the Department of Disabilities on Capitol. But Eichler apparently sketched out and then worked with a sculptor to do all the bas-reliefs. Originally, they wouldn't have been against orange. And this is one of my favorites. This is the one for drama. Eichler was also a very talented plein air painter, designer. This was actually his kind of signature. But even I, with my interest, had never taken the time to look at each of the bas-reliefs individually. And when I finally got done, I realized there was 10 of them. And then I said, well, it'd be kind of fun to lay them out and identify them. And they are science, domestic arts, architecture, fine arts, industrial arts, drama, music, and literature. But there are two more. And they had really special, important meaning for Eichler. Okay. And I didn't mean the buildup to be that long, but the two final were for the School for the Blind and the School for the Deaf. Now I'm going to share with you two things that some of you may know, but they were both a major surprise to me when I first started researching Eichler. The first is Alfred Eichler was deaf. He worked in the office of California Department of Architecture for 38 years as a deaf professional. And he struggled the first 10 years of his education and professional life because in the early 19th century, no one wanted to take on a deaf architect. But Eichler, I know, did these also because in the early 30s for the state of California, he designed the entire School for Blind and Deaf at Berkeley. So I was really heartfelt when I finally focused on these and realized I understand why he did these. Another movement of the Deco period, which isn't technically Art Deco, but it's often thrown in, and I like to include it when I talk about Sacramento because we have some terrific examples, are murals of the social realism movement. And of course, this also is part of the WPA. And many times Art Deco buildings had social realist murals. And we have really a wonderful one in Sacramento. And that would be the fresco in the lobby of the City College Auditorium. And this was done by a noted San Francisco artist by the name of Ralph Stackpole. And if you've never had a chance to look at it, I hope you do, because it's just it's a terrific, terrific piece. It's 10 foot high by 30 feet wide. And I made another wonderful discovery when I was doing the project, that of all things, there is an art collection at City College associated with the Condos Gallery. It has 1,300 pieces. And while I was in there doing some archival research, lo and behold, they have one of his original sketches, basically getting the measurements for the mural. Now, I mentioned the mural is 30 feet wide. The sketch is only about 24 inches wide. Here's just a detail Many of the models were actually on campus the summer of 1936 when Stackpole actually did it. The woman holding the flowers was an actual student. Supposedly the gentleman or professor seated was a physics professor at the school. And then there's one other of note, and that is Stackpole was not only a gifted artist, you may also know him. He did the central 80-foot figure of Pacifica at the Golden Gate Exposition in 1939. He was also internationally connected. He actually was in Paris as a student with Diego Rivera. And he had he knew Rivera before Frida Kahlo or his Rivera's relationship. But in the 1930s, Stackpole promoted for the Riveras to come to San Francisco in the early 30s, and he did all of his murals in San Francisco were really done at that time and were promoted by Stackpole. Another favorite, if you've never been, is the main reading room at the California State Library, also known as the Mosque Library and Court Building, and that is the 1928 mural by Maynard Dixon. Once again, it's just a fabulous piece. In particular, because of my deco interest, I love the heroic male figure with the machinery. It's just a beautiful segment. And then this is just a wonderful vintage period photo of Dixon on the scaffolding, actually painting the mural. And then this is the last section. Because of my extensive research, I realized, well, actually, some of the most interesting treasures might be the ones that are actually not on public display. And so I went back and thought about and just picked one or two items from 6 or 7 of the local archives and museums, just to give you a flavor. If you have any interest in research, these are all great institutions. They're extremely helpful. And I always like to give a shout out to them because they do a great job. The first one I like to talk about is the California Statewide Museum of Collections Center. This is where State Parks puts everything that they don't have on display. And they have several acres under roof. These are old military McClellan base hangars and storage facilities. They are huge. What I'm showing is it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek of Indiana Jones being led by Russian spies to find something in a giant government warehouse in the desert. But when I first went in the statewide museum, that's what it felt like to me. And it's quite an epic place. They do give tours. You have to make reservations, but hopefully when the world opens up, I highly recommend it, even for Friendship Force, if you haven't had a chance to visit. This just gives you just one site, but they have several acres under roof. While walking around, the one piece that really hit me was this bar. I immediately knew what it was. I said, that is got to be a bar off a Streamline train or from the bar car or the cafe car. And the tour guide said, you are absolutely right. And it was from a very notable train. It was from the Daylight. So I've been wondering, how can I present this bar in some sort of presentation? And this just seemed like the perfect moment. This is actually a spread from the 1937 Southern Pacific Bulletin magazine. And up here in the right-hand corner is, lo and behold, exactly the piece that I've been thinking about. Here's a close-up. And gosh, it's sad that they only have the bar. I wish they had all of the decorative arts from the car. This was another just out of the blue. It turned out, because of my interest in WPA, I said, do you have any WPA? They weren't sure, but they looked. and they discovered that they have 6 WPA murals, roughly in the 6 to 8 foot wide category. They're all from Monterey. Some of them come out of the Monterey post office, but this one was I wanted to share because it reminded me once again of Stackpole, Diego Rivera, and I thought it was great that it was by a woman. And the woman is Henrietta Shore, and I know that name. She was part of the classic Carmel art community of the 1930s. And the photo that I just put up, it was actually done by another notable California, Edward Weston. And this is a piece I had no idea they had. Another great facility is the California section of the California State Library. This is actually in the N Street building, not in the classic library building. And they are notable, in addition to having thousands of volumes, they are the repository for all Gladden McBean photos, corporate records, and once again, some wonderful sketches and prints. This, another terrific collection is they have all their presentation drawings from the company that did the McClatchy High School fountain. So this is a detail, and this was the actual presentation piece for, of all things, the Chicago Yacht Club. They have dozens of these. I'm only showing 2 tonight. This is from another well-known Southern California restaurant chain. This is a detail. This is the presentation drawing for the Pig and Whistle, which I think it was a waffle-based themed restaurant. It was very beloved of the period. And once again, they did these custom tiles just for the restaurant chain. Another hidden in plain sight are neon signs. Some of you, if you've had the opportunity to be in Golden One Center, know about the food court with the neon signs. Well, the neon signs actually come and are part of the Center for Sacramento History collection. The center is the archive for the city and county of Sacramento. And the Kings were gracious enough. They were interested in them. They paid for the relighting of the signs. But technically, they are part of the center's collection. And this is near and dear to my heart because I'm on the board of the Center for the Sacramento History. Whoops, I apologize. I splashed out of the presentation.
No, you're still good, Bruce. We're seeing it. I think it just closed your screen. You might try to look for the Zoom.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, that's interesting. If you can see, I'll just click through them individually. If you're seeing them just the screen, I'm in presentation mode.
Yeah.
So can you see the Rosemont?
Got it.
The Rosemont, this building is still on 9th Street between I and K. It's yellow and green. It's not particularly attractive. And maybe it's just because it's worn. But this was a very popular restaurant in the 30s. The sign was neon. And when the restaurant moved out to Folsom Boulevard, they took the sign with them. And the sign was there for many years. If you know where Oboe, I think it's Oboe on Folsom, that is the building. And of all things, it's now part of the center's collection. When the center was running out of space off of Richards Boulevard, we moved it out to McClellan. So here it is arriving at McClellan. And what I wanted to share was that while we have 7 of these magnificent neons at Gold One, there are more waiting to come out and be renovated and be hung somewhere, hopefully at a larger facility in the future. Another of my favorite institutions is the special collections at City College. They helped me immensely putting together a walking tour of the campus. Some of you may have also seen my art balls tour. This is where I did the research for the art balls. This is the archivist for the collections. Her name is Caroline Harker, and she's just terrific. The old library was torn down in 1996, but when they rebuilt the new library, they built a special collections room, and they used as much decorative period wood paneling, doors, windows, tables as possible. This just gives you just a small portion of the room, but you can see it's very robust. They have a lot of history about the special programs at City College. Historically, their aeronautics department was one of the first in the nation. Their nursing program was very early in the nation for a community college. And it also, I just noted when I was putting this together, I noted in the background that up there on the shelf is actually the yearbook I used for my Panther, which was kind of nice. Right there. And then another favorite of mine at the Crocker Museum, this is one of the last a few examples, is the Starred Maiden. This was done by Alexander Sterling Calder. He is and was the father of the Mobile artist, Alexander Calder, but he was the lead sculptor designer for the San Francisco Pan Pacific exhibition in 1915. The one I showed you at Crocker, there were 90 of them. I don't know how many have survived. I don't think anywhere near that many have survived, but this gives you a feel what they looked like. They were actually on a very heroic court, and these individual sculptures line the whole surround of the building. And then my last shout out is to the Sacramento room of the Sacramento Public Library, another terrific room. It's in the old building, and they have wonderful things. In this particular case, I asked the librarian, James Scott, what he thought would be a nice item, and he picked the 1930 review yearbook cover, which actually is just, it's a very simple, hand-drawn, but it reminds me very much of the period where we had Rudolph Valentino and Ramon Navarro as Hollywood legends. So I got a kick out of that. So finally, I'd like to give out a shout out to the Sacramento Art Deco Society. We are another group that got very, financially challenged. We typically would ask donations at our events. We would always do a gala with a silent auction. And unfortunately, those were all curtailed. So if you enjoyed tonight's presentation and feel so inspired, we do have a donations tab at our website, or if you're just interested in finding out more about the Art Deco Society, feel free to visit our site. So that is it, and I'm happy to answer anyone's questions.
Okay, I'm going to stop your sharing, Bruce, which should bring up your screen. Are you able to see it now?
I do. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce.
My pleasure.
So we did have a few questions that came in. I'm going to remove the spotlight and just the speaker view. So Ray had a question. Did you want to ask that yourself, Ray?
Sure. You showed a slide with the over a doorway, the propeller, the perfect example of machinery theme. Where was that building?
It's a warehouse, and it's not too far from I can't give you a physical address, but I would happy to send it to Kathleen, and then she could send it to you.
Oh, okay.
But it's well taken a look at. It's a really unique piece.
So it's in a warehouse. Nobody sees it.
Well, no, it's at the entrance to a warehouse.
Oh.
Or I don't think it's as big as like the storage warehouse, but it's more of, it's not one of the administrative buildings.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
You're
Great.
welcome.
PJ mentioned that Esparto High School also has some Art Deco that's very nice.
Very nice. Very nice. As a matter of fact, I have an exclusive WPA presentation, and that auditorium is in that presentation because it's
wow.
exceptional.
Okay. There were some comments about the state architect. I'm sorry, I was doing something, missed the name, but they said, was he 15 when he became the architect, or did they mishear you?
No, well, let me see. And I'm guessing, I believe he was born roughly 1895. He got meningitis at 13 or 14. And he didn't start at the state architect's office until 1926. So he's roughly 30, 31 when he started at the
Okay.
state
That makes
architect's
more
office.
sense. They were all like a little 15.
But that's an interesting thought, though, because he did start in a architect's office about that age,
Really?
because his father, he was blessed in that his father was a successful San Francisco surgeon. And I think the family worked very hard to find opportunities. Dare I say, they pulled some strings. And so I know he started working because it was even being difficult in high school. And he actually kind of got an appointment to the Department of Navy and went to Washington, D.C. To work on some sort of architectural office capacity during the war. And I think that was probably important to him, that, I can't imagine being a young man and feeling his inability to participate, including in the war effort.
Yeah, makes sense. So there were some questions about the murals. It says, how did they get these murals into museums/storage when they were painted on walls?
That is a great question. And basically the difference is they were not frescoes. Not all the murals were frescoes. Many of them were. The ones that were, if they weren't on canvas and the building came down, sadly, the mural went down with the building.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but that's a great question.
Yeah. Terry Parker had a question. Terry, did you want to unmute yourself and ask that?
Yes, I loved everything you shared. And like most people, I love Art Deco art and architecture and everything associated with it. But what really struck me was the mural by I think I got her name right, Henrietta Stone.
Yes.
The artichoke pictures.
Pardon me?
The artichoke pictures. It just blows me away. The colors are so, it's just magnificent. How could I find more artwork by her?
Well, you can Google her. I am very much interested, as the introduction shared, I'm very much interested in artists and architects, particularly those that, not everyone can rise to the fame of Frank Lloyd Wright or Picasso. And there are lots and lots of artists that really just didn't get their due. They were very much respected amongst their own, Edward Weston was a close friend of hers. And I don't know if you're familiar as a group, but he's one of the 10 most important 20th century black and white photographers, along with, Ansel Adams and Dorothea Lange. Very important. And my impression is she was very much respected by her community. But this is also the Depression. How do you, it's one thing to survive today, at least we have unusual options, like whether it be TikTok or blogs or developing your own webpage. It was very challenging. I will mention, she also did some wonderful lunette murals and they're still up in Santa Cruz. So if you're ever in Santa Cruz and you like her art, I know the last time I went down, I hadn't seen them in many years, and I went and took a look.
So did I get the name right? Henrietta Stone?
Yes.
Stone. Okay, because
Yes.
I'm definitely going to look it up. And that was a mural.
No, it was Henrietta Shore. Shore.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Short.
You're absolutely right.
Short. All right. I didn't hear the name right. I'm glad I clarified that. Her colors, especially for a mural, are so brilliant. Usually murals are fairly muted in color. So,
well, let me give you another little surprise. Two little surprises. The first is there are 5 more murals by 5 different additional artists there in the repository. And and they don't have some of them don't have the best paperwork, which is kind of frustrating as a historian. And on top of it, some of them were some of you may have heard the term deaccession. That's basically when a museum has decided that they just, for whatever reason, can't store, sadly, in some cases for financial reasons, they sell off a piece. That piece may have been released just because of storage issues by the Monterey Museum of Art, which to me is kind of astounding because it's so appropriate. You know, it's artichokes and field workers, and you know, it's but even for museum storage space is expensive.
So Marty has a question. Marty, do you want to go ahead with that?
Sure. Are you familiar with the Lucille Lloyd murals in the hearing room in the annex of the state capitol?
I am. I am.
And so you know that building's slated to be destroyed.
Well, yes, and the irony is, if my memory serves me, those were actually originally in the Art Deco modern state building in Los Angeles.
They were.
And of course, that had to come down after the Northridge earthquake. So, but at least those are movable.
Okay.
My actually bigger concern are the aluminum panels, which are very Deco.
The Malmquist, all of the, all of
I am
Malmquist,
because is there any question they'll be saved? Yes, they will be saved. Will they go in a crate and never see the light of day? That's my big fear. That the state or the new architect or architectural firm will not embrace them. And you know, that's really dependent upon even if the annex comes down. And I will mention the annex was designed by Alfred Eichler.
It was, that's right.
If it comes down, how do you honor the past? I mean, if you don't hire an architectural firm that has any interest in honoring the past, you bring up wonderful questions.
Right. Yeah, I'm a volunteer at the state capitol, and because of the shutdown, the staff of the Parks Department have been doing research on all this stuff. And so we've had great presentations about all of Monquist and Lucille Lloyd. And so we've been apprised of these treasures. And it's just, you know, it's sort of a bonus of this shutdown period that they were able to do this research and present it to us instead of giving tours to the public. But all of Monquist, so that's not in that Art Deco period that you mentioned, that because that building was done in the 50s, right?
Right, and that's another reason I was talking about the extension of the Deco period, that the fine art purists will say, well, that's the cutoff period. But the truth is, and Malmquist is another person I've not really gone deep into, but I love those because by and large, he was doing an art style in the late 40s that was really more reflective of the 30s or the 20s.
Yeah,
it's just that was his style. And I honestly think that, unfortunately, I would love to find documentation that I have a sneaking suspicion that Eichler was attracted because of his own love of bas reliefs and hired him regardless of the style. I think there was an attraction there. I can't prove it, but that would be my inclination because it was almost out of style at the moment it was put in.
For those of you who don't know, we're talking about the east entrance to the Capitol. It has these beautiful, what are they, metal?
I believe they're cast aluminum and they're bas reliefs. And just like the heroic murals of the Great Depression, you know, one is for agriculture, industry. The central one is the state seal.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
And his name is on it as a cast. There's cast lettering Malmquist. Actually, I would like to circle back and find out who has done the research, because I'm curious who the other names are. There's
Okay,
like,
I can give you the, we can go offline and I can give you the name of the
that
of
would be
the
terrific.
person. Yeah, okay.
That'd be terrific. Thank you so much.
Well, Bruce, I don't see any other questions in the chat right now, although you've gotten a lot of comments from people who have enjoyed your presentation, as have I. So thank you so much
Great.
for sharing with us. And I want to, I don't know if you can throw up on your screen one more time your place where they can donate to the.
Oh, sure.
I think it's, we should try and encourage everyone to help promote.
Real easy, sacartdeco.org.
Okay, great. Kathy, can you throw that in the chat too?
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, so people just, if you get a chance, go to that website. I'm sure anybody here enjoys Art Deco, and I'm sure there's some cool things to see on that website. I haven't seen
Well,
it.
and I will just share, and this is just a general thought, is that I'm currently developing an Alfred Eichler walking tour. And, at some point we are going to open up. I am also a board member of Sacramento History Museum, and we are starting our underground tours next week.
Oh yeah, I just saw that came up on my email today. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Limited 10 people mass, but it's starting. It's a starting place.
Yep, that's great.
Thank you.
We're looking
That's good to
forward to it.
know.
Wow.
Okay, well, Ray, are we ready to move on?
Yes.
Okay, well, I don't know, Bruce, if you want to hang, but if you don't, we appreciate your time and your coming, sharing with us today.
Well, thank you again. And please, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. There's also info at SAC Art Deco, or if you have any questions for me.
Perfect. We'll do that.